My name is Brandon, and I am 32 years old now, but the scars from my childhood still follow me everywhere. Family is supposed to be your safe haven, but mine became my prison. The day my sister pushed me down those stairs out of jealousy was not the beginning of my pain, but it was the moment everything changed. Before I dive into how my own sister tried to end me over our parents' favoritism, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family. Trust me, what happened after that fall changed everything. I grew up in what looked like a picture-perfect middle-class home in Cincinnati, Ohio. White picket fence, neatly trimmed lawn, and a family that seemed normal from the outside. My parents, Richard and Diana, had my sister Emma first, and then I came along 3 years later. From my earliest memories, I can recall a subtle difference in how we were treated, though as a child, I could never quite put my finger on what felt wrong. When I was around 5 years old, the differences became more noticeable. My sister had started elementary school, and every achievement of hers, no matter how small, was celebrated with exuberance. A participation ribbon at field day meant dinner at her favorite restaurant. A, B, minus, on a spelling test, warranted ice cream, and proud phone calls to relatives. Meanwhile, my perfect attendance award collected dust on my dresser unacknowledged. Mom, look at my drawing. My teacher said it was the best in class. I remember telling my mother one afternoon after kindergarten, holding up a colorful landscape that my teacher had actually asked to display at the school art show. "That is nice, honey. Put it on the fridge if you want," she replied, without even looking up from the magazine she was reading. Just then, Emma burst through the door, waving a math test with a large B written in red ink. 78%. "Look at my smart girl," Mom jumped up, hugging Emma, and immediately calling Dad at work to share the news. That night, they took us out for pizza, ostensibly to celebrate family achievements. But the entire dinner conversation revolved around Emma's test. No one mentioned my art show. As the years went by, the pattern solidified. My parents attended every single one of Emma's soccer games, cheering wildly from the sidelines, even though she mostly sat on the bench. But when it came to my school play, where I had landed a speaking role, my father had an important meeting and my mother had a migraine. I performed to an audience full of proud parents with an empty spot where mine should have been. I threw myself into academics and art, thinking that if I just achieved enough, they would finally see me. By third grade, I was reading at a sixth grade level. My report cards were filled with glowing comments about my creativity and intelligence. But when I brought them home, my parents would sign them with distracted nods and vague comments like, "Good job, keep it up," before asking Emma about her day. My grandmother, Martha, was the only one who seemed to truly see me. My mother's mother, she lived about an hour away and visited once a month. During those visits, she would bring me art supplies and books, take genuine interest in my hobbies, and listen to my stories with full attention. "You have a special gift, Brandon," she told me once, after examining a detailed sketch I had done of our backyard. "Your eyes see beauty that others miss, and your hands know how to share it with the world. Never let anyone dim that light in you." Those moments with my grandmother became my lifeline, the rare times I felt valued. But they were too infrequent to counterbalance the daily feeling of invisibility in my own home. When I was 8, I fell off my bike and broke my wrist. My father seemed annoyed at having to take me to the emergency room, sighing heavily about missing an important football game on television. 2 months later, Emma sprained her ankle during soccer practice, and both my parents took off work to be with her. They bought her gifts to cheer her up, and let her choose dinner for a week straight. I began to internalize the message that my pain, my achievements, and ultimately my existence were simply less important. I developed the habit of making myself small, taking up less space at the dinner table, speaking less about my day, asking for less help with homework. I became self-sufficient, out of necessity, teaching myself to cook simple meals when my parents were busy with Emma's activities, learning to walk to the library alone to find the books I needed for school projects. Art became my sanctuary. When I drew or painted, I could escape into a world where I controlled the narrative, where I could create beauty and receive immediate visual confirmation of my efforts. No one could ignore or diminish what I created, even if they tried not to see it. By the time I turned 12, I had stopped expecting my parents to notice me. My birthday that year fell on a Saturday, and I woke up excited despite myself. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today I would matter. I came downstairs to find the house empty. A hastily scribbled note on the counter informed me that they had taken Emma to her regional soccer tournament in Columbus. Sorry we had to leave early. There are frozen waffles in the freezer. See you tonight. They had forgotten my birthday entirely. I spent that day alone, drawing a self-portrait that captured the hollow look in my eyes. When they returned home that evening, full of stories about Emma's team winning second place, I did not remind them what day it was. The next morning, my mother suddenly remembered, gasping with her hand over her mouth. "Brandon, your birthday was yesterday. Oh my goodness, how could we forget?" They tried to make it up to me with a last-minute cake and a gift card, but the message had been received loud and clear. I was forgettable. Emma, on the other hand, had birthday parties planned months in advance with custom cakes and dozens of guests. The contrast could not have been more stark. That forgotten birthday marked a turning point in my young life. I stopped trying to win their approval and instead focused on surviving until I could escape. Little did I know then how much worse things would get before I found my freedom. By 14, I had developed a keen awareness of the imbalance in our family. What once seemed like subtle preferences had morphed into obvious favoritism that was impossible to ignore. The financial discrepancy became particularly glaring during our high school years. When Emma turned 16, my parents surprised her with a brand new Honda Civic, complete with custom seat covers and a premium sound system. They made a big production of the reveal, blindfolding her and leading her to the driveway where the car sat with an enormous red bow. The video of her reaction was posted on every social media platform my parents had accounts on. 2 years later, when I reached the same milestone, I received a firm handshake from my father and a speech about responsibility. "We think it is important for you to earn your own way, Brandon," he explained, while my mother nodded in agreement. "Emma is different. She needed the confidence boost. You are more independent." Translation: Emma deserves things. You do not. I ended up working 20 hours a week at the local grocery store to save for a used car, which I finally purchased just before senior year, a 12-year-old Toyota with nearly 150,000 miles on it. When it broke down 3 months later, I paid for the repairs myself, while Emma's oil changes and tire rotations were always covered by Dad. My friend Alex was the first person outside the family to point out how messed up the situation was. We had been friends since middle school, bonded by our shared love of art and similar home situations, though his involved a step-parent who played favorites. "Dude, the way your parents treat you compared to your sister is seriously not normal," Alex told me one afternoon as we watched my dad help Emma with her calculus homework, something he had refused to do for me the previous year, saying I needed to figure it out myself. I know I admitted quietly. It was the first time I had acknowledged the favoritism out loud to anyone other than my grandmother. Sometimes I wonder if I was adopted and they just never told me. "Have you ever called them out on it?" Alex asked. I had not, but his question planted a seed. A week later, when my mother announced she was taking Emma on a shopping spree for the upcoming spring dance, but told me my suit from last year would do just fine, I finally spoke up. "Why does Emma always get new things while I am expected to make? Do I ask, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me? Do you realize how differently you treat us?" The reaction was swift and gaslight-filled. "Brandon, you are being ridiculous and ungrateful," my mother said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "We treat you both exactly the same. Emma just has different needs than you do. You have always been jealous of your sister," my father added his tone, making it clear the discussion was over. "We thought we raised you better than this." I retreated to my room, feeling like I was losing my mind. Was I actually jealous and ungrateful? Was I imagining the whole thing, the self-doubt they planted, took root alongside my growing resentment? Meanwhile, Emma's behavior grew increasingly entitled. She knew she could get away with almost anything. When she borrowed my art supplies without asking and returned them, damaged my parents told me to stop being so protective of just things. When she missed curfew, there were concerned talks about peer pressure. When I came home 10 minutes late from study group, I was grounded for a week for being irresponsible. Despite everything, some desperate part of me still sought their approval. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, joined the debate team, and continued developing my artistic skills, hoping that excellence might finally make them see me. But academic achievements seemed to hold little currency in our household unless they came from Emma. The disparity became so obvious that even extended family began to notice. During Thanksgiving dinner when I was 16, my Aunt Carrie commented on a charcoal drawing of mine that had won a regional competition. "Brandon, this is museum-quality work. Your parents must be bursting with pride," she exclaimed, gesturing toward the piece my grandmother had insisted be displayed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. My parents exchanged glances before my mother offered a lukewarm, "Yes, Brandon is quite talented." "You did tell me about the award, right?" Aunt Carrie pressed, looking confused. "I must have forgotten to mention it," my mother replied quickly, changing the subject to Emma's soccer scholarship prospects, despite her mediocre athletic abilities. Later that evening, I overheard Aunt Carrie confronting my mother in the kitchen. "Diana, what is going on with you and Richard? Do you realize how you talk about Emma versus Brandon? That boy is exceptional, and it is like you do not even see it." The conversation must have struck a nerve, because for a few weeks afterward, my parents made a noticeable effort to show interest in my activities. My father asked about my art projects, and my mother suggested we look at college art programs together. But like all their previous attempts at equal treatment, it was short-lived and superficial, soon giving way to the established pattern. By junior year, my anxiety was at an all-time high. I had developed trust issues that affected my friendships and romantic prospects. I second-guessed compliments, assuming people were just being nice. I struggled to believe anyone could genuinely care about me when my own parents seemed unable to. Then one day, Mr. Pearson, my art teacher, shared information about a prestigious art scholarship that could cover full tuition at several top art schools in the country. It required a portfolio submission and came with a rigorous selection process, but he believed I had a real shot. "This could be your ticket, Brandon," he told me, his eyes serious. "I have taught for 25 years and I have never had a student with your level of talent and technical skill. You deserve this opportunity." For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. This scholarship could be my escape from a house where I was always second best. I could finally build a life where I was valued for who I was. Little did I know that this opportunity, this chance at freedom, would set in motion a chain of events that would nearly cost me my life. I decided to keep the scholarship application secret from my family at first. 17 years of experience had taught me that sharing my hopes usually led to disappointment, either through active discouragement or passive indifference. Instead, I threw myself into creating the best portfolio possible, spending every free moment in the art room after school. Mr. Pearson became my mentor through the process, offering guidance while respecting my unique style. "A portfolio should tell a story about who you are as an artist," he advised, as we selected pieces that showcased my range. I chose a series of charcoal portraits capturing emotions in everyday faces, abstract oil paintings, exploring themes of isolation, and detailed pen and ink cityscapes that transformed ordinary streets into dreamlike landscapes. The centerpiece was a large mixed-media self-portrait that revealed both what the world saw and what lay beneath my external composure, contrasting with inner turmoil visualized through fractured imagery and bold color. "This is college-level work," Brandon, Mr. Pearson said, as we carefully photographed each piece for digital submission. "I would be shocked if you did not get this scholarship." For the personal essay portion, I wrote about how art had become my voice when I felt unheard, my visibility when I felt unseen. I did not directly mention my family situation, but instead focused on how creating art had saved me in ways both large and small. The application process gave me purpose and hope, a secret light I carried through increasingly tense days at home. Emma had started her senior year with declining grades and increasing attitude, yet somehow, my parents found ways to blame external factors rather than hold her accountable. "Her teachers are too strict," they would say. Or, "The pressure of college applications is affecting her focus." Meanwhile, I maintained my perfect GPA while working part-time and developing my portfolio, yet received no acknowledgement for managing these responsibilities. The truth came out about my scholarship application purely by accident. I had been working on my artist statement late one night when Emma barged into my room without knocking, as was her habit. "Mom wants to know if you—" she began, then stopped, when she noticed the application materials spread across my desk. "What is all this?" Before I could stop her, she picked up my essay draft. Her expression darkened as she scanned the text. "The Hamilton Art Scholarship. That is like super prestigious," she said, an odd note in her voice. "You actually think you have a chance at this?" "Mr. Pearson thinks I do," I replied, trying to take the paper back from her. "Must be nice to have a teacher who plays favorites," she snapped, throwing the paper down. "Some of us have to work for everything we get." The irony of her statement was so profound, I could not even formulate a response before she stormed out. That night at dinner, Emma announced my secret to our parents. "Did you know Brandon is applying for some fancy art scholarship? Apparently his teacher thinks he is the next Picasso or something." My parents exchanged looks before my father cleared his throat. "An art scholarship? That is the first we have heard of this." I explained the opportunity in measured tones, trying to contain my excitement while emphasizing the practical aspects. "It would cover full tuition, room and board. It is very competitive, but Mr. Pearson thinks my portfolio is strong." "Art school," my father repeated flatly. "And what exactly would you do with an art degree? How would you support yourself?" This launched a 20-minute lecture about real careers versus hobbies, with pointed comparisons to Emma's practical plans to study business at the state university. No mention was made of her dropping grades, or the fact that her admission was far from guaranteed, without significant parental intervention. "We have been saving for Emma's education since she was born," my mother added. "College is expensive, and we simply have not set aside the same amount for you. This scholarship would need to cover everything." It was the first time they had openly admitted the financial disparity in planning for our futures. I should have been hurt, but instead felt a strange relief at having the unspoken finally acknowledged. "That is why the scholarship is so important," I explained. "And there are other scholarships I can apply for to cover any remaining expenses." "Well, do not get your hopes up too high," my father cautioned. "These things are very competitive, and we do not want you disappointed." My grandmother Martha was the only family member who reacted with appropriate enthusiasm when I told her about the scholarship during her next visit. "Of course you should apply," she exclaimed. "Your talent deserves to be nurtured at the best school possible." When I mentioned my parents' financial concerns, her expression hardened. "If that scholarship does not cover everything, I will help with the rest," she stated firmly. "I have some savings, and there is nothing I would rather spend it on than your education." Her support strengthened my resolve, but the atmosphere at home grew increasingly strained as the scholarship notification date approached. Emma seemed personally offended by my ambition, making snide comments about artsy types and how I thought I was too good for normal college. My parents, meanwhile, focused all their attention on Emma's college applications, hiring a private counselor to help her write essays and even calling in favors with alumni connections. When her first acceptance letter arrived from a middle-tier state school, they reacted as if she had gotten into Harvard, throwing a celebration dinner and posting congratulatory messages all over social media. I forced myself to be happy for her to rise above the inequity. "Congratulations, Emma," I said, offering a genuine smile. "That is a good school." She barely acknowledged my comment, too busy basking in our parents' praise. But later that night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, her voice low but distinct through our shared wall. "I mean, it is fine for now, but Dad is working on getting me into Riverside through his connections. Brandon is being all high and mighty about some art school pipe dream, as if he will actually get in." I pressed my ear against the wall, heart pounding. "Mom and Dad have always given him whatever he wants." She continued the lie so blatant, I nearly gasped aloud. "It is like, hello, there are 2 kids in this family. Anyway, he will probably fail and end up living at home forever. Can you imagine? So pathetic?" Her words crystallized something I had suspected but never fully acknowledged. Emma was not just benefiting from the favoritism, she was actively participating in it. She saw me as competition for our parents' affection and resources, and my success threatened the narrative she had built about her superiority. As the weeks passed and scholarship decision day grew closer, I channeled my anxiety into finalizing my portfolio and preparing for any contingency. I researched student loans, looked into work-study programs, and applied for several smaller scholarships as backups. Meanwhile, the household tension continued to build like pressure in a sealed container ready to explode at the slightest provocation. None of us knew just how violent that explosion would be, or how it would permanently alter the course of all our lives. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday in April, just as the spring flowers were beginning to bloom across our front yard. I had been checking the mail obsessively for weeks, and when I saw the large packet with the Hamilton Art Institute logo in the corner, my heart nearly stopped. Thin envelopes meant rejection. Thick packets meant acceptance. This envelope was gloriously, wonderfully thick. I took it to my room with shaking hands, closing the door before carefully breaking the seal. The first words leapt off the page. Congratulations. We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as a Hamilton National Arts Scholar. Full tuition, room and board, art supplies, stipend, even a travel allowance for semester breaks. Everything I had dreamed of, and more. I read the letter 3 times to be sure it was real, then called Mr. Pearson, who whooped so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I knew it, he exclaimed. Brandon, this is huge. Do you understand how competitive this scholarship is? Less than 1% of applicants receive it. This is validation of everything I have been telling you about your talent. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, letter in hand, and allowed myself a moment of pure, untainted joy. This was my ticket out. My chance to build a life where I could be valued for who I was, not measured against someone else and found wanting. I decided to share the news at dinner that night. Despite years of disappointment, some childish part of me still hoped that this achievement, this objective external validation of my worth, might finally make my parents proud. When I came downstairs, I found my mother preparing a special meal, complete with a store-bought cake. My stomach dropped when I realized the celebration was not for my news, which they did not yet know, but because Emma had received another college acceptance letter, this time from Riverside University, where my father had indeed pulled another, that raid, strings with his alumni connections. There she is, our college girl, my father beamed, as Emma entered the dining room. 2 acceptances now. We always knew you could do it. Throughout the meal, my parents fawned over Emma's accomplishment, discussing dorm options and course selections, as if her attendance was already settled. I waited patiently for a break in the conversation, the acceptance letter burning a hole in my pocket. I actually have some news, too, I finally said during a momentary lull. In a minute, Brandon, my mother, responded, barely glancing my way. Emma, tell us again what the admissions counselor said about the business program. This pattern repeated 3 more times my attempt to speak consistently, sidelined for more discussion of Emma's options. By the time dessert was served, my initial excitement had curdled into familiar resignation. As my mother cut the cake that read, "Congratulations, Emma," in flowing script, I decided to simply state my news without preamble. I got the Hamilton Scholarship, I said, my voice cutting through their chatter. Full ride. Everything covered. The table fell silent. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying expressions: surprise from my mother, confusion from my father, and something darker from Emma. "The art scholarship," my father finally asked. "You actually got it." I pulled out the letter and handed it to him. Less than 1% of applicants receive it. I repeated Mr. Pearson's words as my father scanned the document. "Well," he said after a moment, handing it back without fully reading it. "That is certainly unexpected. This is Emma's special dinner." "Brandon," my mother added with a tight smile. "Perhaps we could discuss your news another time." When I asked, an unfamiliar heat rising in my chest, when would be a good time to celebrate my achievement, because in 17 years, I cannot recall a single dinner dedicated to something I accomplished. "That is not true," my mother protested weakly. "Name one," I challenged, years of suppressed anger finally finding voice. "Name one time you celebrated anything I did with even half the enthusiasm you are showing right now for Emma's safety school acceptance." "How dare you," Emma interjected. "Just because your weird art teacher thinks you are special does not mean you can ruin my night." "Emma has worked very hard," my father said sternly. "You are being selfish, Brandon." "Selfish?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. That is rich coming from the people who have given her everything and me nothing my entire life. We have provided for you equally, my mother insisted, though her eyes could not meet mine. That is a lie, and you know it, I replied, standing up from the table. But it does not matter anymore. In 3 months, I will be gone, and you can pretend I never existed, just like you have been practicing all these years. I turned to leave, but Emma's voice stopped me. See, he always does this, makes everything about him. When things are finally going well for me, her face was flushed with anger as she stood knocking her chair backward. You have always been jealous of me. Jealous. I turned back incredulous. Of what? The fact that our parents love you and tolerate me, that they pay for everything for you, while I work 20 hours a week for basic necessities. What exactly should I be jealous of, Emma? They love you too, she said, but her tone suggested, even she did not believe it. You are just too busy feeling sorry for yourself to notice. Emma, Brandon. That is enough, my father interjected, standing as well. Brandon apologized to your sister for ruining her celebration. And there it was, the final confirmation of where I stood in this family's hierarchy of needs. I had received one of the most prestigious art scholarships in the country, and not only was I not being celebrated, I was being asked to apologize for mentioning it. I will not apologize for existing, I said quietly, turning once more to leave the dining room. I heard the scrape of Emma's chair as she followed me. Do not walk away when I am talking to you, she shouted at my back. I ignored her, taking the stairs 2 at a time to reach the sanctuary of my room. But she was right behind me, her footsteps heavy with rage. You always do this, she continued, as we reached the second-floor landing. Play the victim when you are just as privileged as I am. Poor Brandon, so misunderstood, so talented, so special. I turned at my bedroom door, suddenly exhausted by the endless cycle. Emma, I am not doing this right now. Congratulations on Riverside. Enjoy your cake. Do not patronize me. She spat, shoving my shoulder hard enough that I stumbled back against the wall. You think you are better than all of us, with your precious art and your scholarship. I never said that, I replied, keeping my voice level. I just want what you take for granted every day, a family that actually sees me. They see you, she sneered. They see a selfish, ungrateful son who thinks he is too good for this family. You have no idea what you are talking about, I said, turning the knob to my room. This conversation is over. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, though it could only have been seconds. As I began to enter my room, I felt Emma's hands on my back, shoving with unexpected force. I remember the sensation of weightlessness, the moment of confusion as my feet left the ground. Our house had an open stairwell design, with the second-floor hallway overlooking the entryway below. The force of Emma's push sent me not into my room, but sideways toward the railing that separated the hallway from the 15-foot drop to the hardwood floor of the entryway. I heard my mother scream from somewhere below as my hip hit the railing. For a heartbeat, I thought I had caught myself, but then the momentum carried me over. The last thing I saw before falling was Emma's face, her expression transforming from rage to shock as she realized what she had done. Then I was falling, tumbling through open air. I remember thinking with strange clarity, so this is how it ends. My body hit the hardwood floor with a sickening thud. Pain exploded through my left side. The last thing I heard before blackness claimed me was my father's voice shouting my name, finally calling for me with genuine concern. I drifted back to consciousness in fragments, aware, first of the antiseptic smell, then the rhythmic beeping, and finally the dull throbbing pain, radiating from multiple points in my body. When I managed to open my eyes, the fluorescent lights above seemed unnaturally bright, causing me to wince and close them again. Brandon, can you hear me? A woman's voice, professional but kind. Not my mother. I tried again, opening my eyes more slowly this time. A nurse in blue scrubs stood beside the bed, checking the monitors. There you are, she said with a gentle smile. You gave everyone quite a scare. I am Nurse Diane. You are at Cincinnati Memorial Hospital. Do you remember what happened? Memories flooded back in disjointed flashes. The scholarship letter, the argument, Emma's hands on my back, the terrifying sensation of falling. I tried to nod, but stopped when pain shot through my neck. I fell. I managed to say, my voice hoarse. That is right, she confirmed. You have a concussion, a broken left arm, 3 cracked ribs, and quite a collection of bruises. But considering the height you fell from, you are actually very lucky. No spinal or internal organ damage. Lucky was not the word I would have chosen. I tried to shift position and gasped at the stabbing pain in my side. Try not to move too much, Nurse Diane advised, adjusting something on my IV. This will help with the pain. Your parents are in the waiting area. Would you like to see them? I hesitated, then nodded slightly. Despite everything, some part of me wanted to see their reaction, to know if my injuries had finally broken through their indifference. A few minutes later, my parents entered the room, their faces pale and drawn. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and my father looked older than I had ever seen him. Emma was notably absent. Brandon, my mother whispered, approaching the bed tentatively. How are you feeling? Like I fell down a flight of stairs, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. An uncomfortable silence followed, my father shifting his weight from one foot to the other, while my mother fidgeted with her wedding ring, neither meeting my eyes directly. The doctor says you were very fortunate, my father finally said. It could have been much worse. Another silence, heavier this time. Where is Emma? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. My parents exchanged glances before my mother spoke. She is very upset. She feels terrible about. What happened? What happened? I repeated flatly. You mean when she pushed me over the railing? It was an accident, Brandon, my father said quickly. She never meant for you to fall. An accident? I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. She followed me upstairs in a rage, shoved me repeatedly, and pushed me toward an open stairwell. Which part was accidental exactly? She says she only meant to push you into your room, my mother explained, her voice pleading. She did not realize how close you were to the railing. And you believe that? It was not a question, but my father answered anyway. Emma has never been violent before. She is devastated by what happened. So devastated, she could not come see if I was alive. I noted the pain medication, making me bolder than usual. Nurse Diane, who had been discreetly checking my vitals during this exchange, gave my parents a look I could not quite interpret. I need to check Brandon's neurological responses now. Could you step out for a few minutes? After they left, she worked in silence for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Hospital policy requires me to ask this, and I want you to know you can speak freely. Do you feel safe returning home after discharge? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Your injuries are consistent with a fall, but the circumstances concern me, she explained carefully. If there is any abuse happening in your home, we can help connect you with resources. Her concern coming from a complete stranger nearly undid me. When was the last time anyone besides my grandmother or Mr. Pearson had worried about my well-being? My sister pushed me deliberately, I said quietly. My parents are trying to minimize it, like they have minimized everything she has ever done to me. They always take her side. Nurse Diane nodded, making a note in my chart. Thank you for telling me. A social worker will come speak with you before any discharge decisions are made. Over the next 2 days, a parade of medical professionals examined me each conversation, reinforcing how serious my injuries had been and how much worse they could have been. A CT scan confirmed the concussion but ruled out brain bleeding. My left arm was set and casted. The cracked ribs would heal on their own, but made every breath painful. Emma finally visited on the second day, entering my room like a condemned prisoner approaching the gallows. Her eyes were swollen, her normally perfectly styled hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Hi, she said, hovering near the door rather than approaching the bed. Hi, I replied, observing her discomfort with detached curiosity. I am sorry, she blurted after an awkward silence. I never meant for you to fall. I was just so angry, and I wasn't thinking clearly. And, she trailed off, seeming to realize how inadequate her words were. You could have killed me, I said simply. She flinched. I know. I am so sorry, Brandon. Please believe me. The thing was, I did believe she had not intended me to fall over the railing. But I also believed she had fully intended to hurt me, to put me in my place for daring to outshine her. The distinction seemed important, but difficult to articulate through the fog of pain medication. I believe you did not mean for me to fall over the railing, I finally said. But you did mean to hurt me. You have always enjoyed seeing me hurt. That is not true, she protested, tears filling her eyes. Isn't it? Remember when you told all the kids at school not to come to my birthday party in 4th grade? Or when you ripped up my art portfolio the night before submission deadline in 9th grade? Or when you told Melissa Johnson I had a contagious skin condition when you found out I liked her? Each example made her shrink further into herself. We were kids, she whispered. Siblings fight. No, Emma. That is not normal sibling rivalry. That is systematic cruelty enabled by parents who always take your side. And now it has escalated to physical violence. Before she could respond, the door opened, and my grandmother Martha burst in her face a storm of emotion. She took one look at Emma and pointed toward the door. Out, she commanded. I will speak with you later. Emma fled without protest, and my grandmother turned her attention to me, her expression softening instantly. Oh, my sweet boy, she murmured carefully, taking my uninjured hand. When they called me, I thought, I was so afraid. She could not finish the sentence, but she did not need to. I saw in her eyes what I had always longed to see in my parents' genuine unconditional love and concern for my well-being. I am okay, Grandma, I assured her, squeezing her hand. Banged up, but still in one piece. Tell me exactly what happened, she demanded, and do not spare any details to protect anyone. So I told her everything from the scholarship acceptance to the argument at dinner to Emma's rage on the stairs. I had never seen my grandmother so angry as when I described how my parents had immediately started making excuses for Emma. This stops now, she declared when I finished. I have stood by far too long watching how they treat you, always telling myself it was not my place to interfere. Well, I am interfering now. True to her word, when my parents returned later that day, my grandmother confronted them in the hallway outside my room. Though I could not hear the exact words, the tone was unmistakable. For perhaps the first time in her life, my mother was being held accountable by her own mother. The social worker Miss Torres visited that afternoon. Her gentle questioning helped me articulate years of emotional neglect, culminating in the physical incident. Do you want to press charges against your sister? She asked, after listening to my full account. The question stunned me. I had not considered the legal implications of what Emma had done. I don't know, I admitted. Would that make me a bad person? Miss Torres shook her head. There is nothing wrong with holding someone accountable for causing you harm, Brandon. What Emma did was assault regardless of her intent. You have every right to pursue legal consequences if you choose to. That evening, as I lay awake, listening to the hospital sounds, I weighed my options. Part of me wanted to forgive Emma to preserve what little family harmony remained, but a stronger part recognized that without consequences, nothing would change. Emma would continue to act with impunity, and my parents would continue to enable her. When my parents visited the next morning looking haggard and subdued, I had made my decision. I am pressing charges against Emma. I informed them calmly, and when I am discharged, I will be staying with Grandma, not coming home. Brandon, please. My mother began, tears immediately springing to her eyes. We are family. We can work this out privately. We have had 17 years to work this out privately, I replied. Nothing has changed. In fact, it has gotten worse. I could have died, Mom. Do you understand that? Your daughter nearly killed your son, and your first instinct was still to protect her, not me. We were in shock, my father argued. We never meant to minimize what happened. But you did, like you always do. I took a painful breath. I am done. The pattern stops here. They continued to plead, to promise. Things would be different, but I remained firm. By the time they left, it was clear I would not be persuaded, and a new reality was taking shape for all of us, one where I finally stood up for my own worth. 4 days after the fall, I was discharged from the hospital into my grandmother's care. The doctors had insisted I have supervision during my recovery due to the concussion, and there was never any question about who would provide it. My grandmother had already transformed her guest room into a comfortable recovery space, complete with an adjustable bed that made sleeping with my injuries easier. My parents called daily, their messages growing increasingly desperate, as they realized I was serious about the charges against Emma. The official police report had been filed from my hospital bed, and a detective had taken my statement, photographed my injuries, and interviewed the medical staff about the consistency between my account and my physical condition. Emma called once, leaving a tearful voicemail begging me to reconsider. "Please, Brandon, don't do this. It will ruin my life. I'll lose my college acceptances. I'll have a record. Please. I am so sorry. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." I did not call her back. Her concern, as always, was for herself, not for the pain she had caused me. A week after my discharge, we received notice that the district attorney had decided to pursue the case charging Emma with assault in the second degree. My parents immediately hired an expensive attorney for her, another reminder of where their priorities lay. My recovery period became a time of reflection and healing, both physical and emotional. My grandmother created a nurturing environment without hovering, giving me space to process my feelings while ensuring I had everything I needed. She set up an art space in her sunroom where I could work one-handed on small projects as my strength returned. Mr. Pearson visited regularly, bringing assignments, so I would not fall behind, in updates from the Hamilton Art Institute, who had been informed of my situation and granted me a deferral, if needed, though I was determined to start on time in the Hamilton Art Institute. Alex came by almost daily, after school, keeping me connected to the outside world and providing much-needed normalcy through our conversations about art, music, and the future. "You know, as awful as this whole thing has been, you seem different now," he observed one afternoon, as we sketched together in the sunroom. "More. I don't know, solid somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I finally stopped trying to earn love from people who cannot give it." The preliminary hearing for Emma's case was scheduled 6 weeks after the incident. By then, I had graduated high school, receiving my diploma privately, rather than attending the ceremony where I would have had to face Emma, and was well into my physical recovery. The cast would remain on my arm for another month, and my ribs still ached with certain movements, but the concussion symptoms had mostly resolved. The courtroom was intimidating, all dark wood and solemn faces. Emma sat with her attorney, looking small and frightened in a conservative blue dress that I assumed had been chosen to make her appear innocent and remorseful. My parents sat directly behind her, a united front of support. I sat with my grandmother and the victim advocate assigned by the court, trying to ignore the occasional glares from my father or pleading looks from my mother. What I had not anticipated was the number of witnesses willing to testify about the pattern of behavior leading up to the incident. Mr. Pearson had documented years of concerning interactions, including the time Emma had deliberately destroyed my artwork. Alex came prepared with dated journal entries recounting instances of favoritism and cruelty he had witnessed. Even my Aunt Carrie had volunteered to testify about the family dynamics she had observed. The most surprising testimony came from a former babysitter who had cared for us when I was 7 and Emma 10. She described catching Emma deliberately breaking my things and then blaming me, and how my parents had consistently believed Emma's version of events despite evidence to the contrary. In my professional opinion, as a now licensed child psychologist, she stated the pattern of parental favoritism created a dangerous dynamic, where one child was empowered to act without consequences, while the other was consistently devalued. Emma's attorney tried to paint the incident as an isolated moment of teenage anger with unintended consequences, but the prosecution methodically established the long history leading up to it. When Emma finally took the stand, she broke down in tears, admitting that she had pushed me, but insisting she never meant for me to fall over the railing. "I was just so angry," she sobbed. "Brandon always made everything so difficult. He was always so perfect, making me look bad in comparison. When he got that scholarship, something just snapped inside me." Her words revealed more than she perhaps intended, exposing the twisted logic by which her resentment of me had been justified. In her mind, my achievements had somehow victimized my existence, a personal affront to her sense of specialness. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened to all testimony with an impassive expression. When all evidence had been presented, she addressed Emma directly. "Young lady, I have heard enough to conclude that this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but the culmination of years of escalating behavior enabled by parental negligence, she stated. Your brother could have died or been permanently disabled from that fall. The fact that his injuries were not more severe is a matter of luck, not intent. She then turned to my parents. And you two bear significant responsibility for creating an environment where such an incident could occur. Your favoritism and failure to establish appropriate boundaries contributed directly to this outcome. Returning her attention to Emma, she continued, Given your age and lack of prior criminal record, I am sentencing you to 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory weekly therapy sessions. Additionally, you will have no contact with the victim except in therapeutic settings agreed upon by all parties. Should you violate these terms, you will face juvenile detention. Emma's shoulders slumped in relief at avoiding detention, though the no-contact order clearly distressed. My parents, who had somehow maintained the fantasy that our family would return to normal after the legal proceedings, concluded. As we left the courthouse, a reporter approached, asking if I had any comment on the verdict. I hesitated, then simply said, I hope my sister gets the help she needs, and I am grateful for the opportunity to move forward with my life. That summer became a period of rebuilding for me. Free from the constant pressure to prove my worth to indifferent parents, I flourished under my grandmother's care. My portfolio expanded with new works exploring themes of liberation and self-discovery. The cast came off my arm in July, and intensive physical therapy restored most of my strength and mobility. When August arrived, I was ready physically and emotionally to begin my journey at Hamilton Art Institute. My grandmother helped me move into the dormitory, arranging my space with the same care she had shown during my recovery. I am so proud of you, Brandon, she told me, as we finished setting up my new room. Not just for your talent, though that is remarkable, but for your courage in standing up for yourself and your willingness to build a new life on your own terms. That first semester was challenging, but exhilarating. I threw myself into my studies, soaking up knowledge from professors who recognized and nurtured my abilities. For the first time, I was in an environment where my artistic vision was valued rather than dismissed as impractical. I made new friends who knew nothing of my family history, people who liked me for who I was, rather than seeing me through the distorting lens of comparison to a favored sibling. My roommate Julian became a particularly close friend. His easygoing nature and genuine interest in others, helping me learn to trust again. Professor James, my drawing instructor, took a special interest in my development, pushing me to explore techniques and subjects I might have avoided on my own. Art is not just about skill, Brandon, he often said. It is about courage, about being willing to reveal yourself through your work. Under his guidance, I began a series exploring family dynamics and the search for identity, translating my personal experience into universal themes that resonated with viewers. When these pieces were selected for the Freshman Showcase exhibition, I felt a validation that went beyond academic achievement. I was not just surviving away from my toxic family environment. I was thriving, building a life rich with meaning and genuine connection. The scholarship that had triggered such drama had indeed changed everything, just not in the way any of us could have predicted on that fateful day. 5 years after the fall, my life had transformed beyond recognition. I had graduated with honors from Hamilton Art Institute and established myself as an emerging talent in the contemporary art scene. My work had been featured in several group exhibitions, and I had just secured my first solo show at a respected gallery in Chicago. The physical scars from my injuries had faded to barely noticeable marks, but the emotional healing had been a longer, more complex process. Weekly therapy sessions throughout college had helped me understand the dynamics that had shaped my childhood and develop healthier patterns for my adult relationships. Trauma does not just disappear because you remove yourself from the traumatic environment, my therapist, Dr. Linden, had explained early in our work together. It lives in your body, in your reactions, in the stories you tell yourself about your worth. Gradually, with her guidance, I learned to recognize and counter the negative beliefs I had internalized from years of being the unfavored child. I discovered that I could accept love without having to earn it through achievement. I built friendships based on mutual respect rather than constant striving for approval. Throughout those 5 years, my grandmother remained my most steadfast supporter, attending every exhibition and celebration. We spoke weekly, and I visited her regularly, our bond stronger than ever. My parents had made sporadic attempts to contact me after the court case, sending birthday cards and holiday greetings that grew increasingly plaintive as time passed. I responded with polite but distant notes, maintaining firm boundaries around my emotional availability to them. Emma and I had no direct contact per the court order, though I occasionally heard updates through my grandmother. She had attended a state university, not Riverside after all, as her legal troubles had indeed affected her admission status. According to my grandmother, she had struggled with depression after the court case, but eventually engaged meaningfully with therapy. I had just returned from installing my Chicago exhibition when my phone rang with my grandmother's number. "Brandon, dear," she said, when I answered her voice, carrying an unusual hesitation. "I have something to discuss with you, and I want you to know that you are free to say no." "What is it, Grandma?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Your parents have asked me to help arrange a meeting with you. They say they have been doing family therapy for the past 2 years and have come to understand their role in what happened. They would like a chance to apologize in person." I sat down heavily on my couch, a swirl of emotions rising at the prospect. "I don't know if I am ready for that," I admitted. "You do not have to be," she assured me. "Your healing comes first. But I will say this, as someone who has witnessed their journey, I believe their remorse is genuine. They have done significant work to understand how deeply they failed you." After discussing it further with Dr. Linden, I agreed to a brief meeting at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in a neighboring town. My grandmother would accompany me, providing both support and a buffer if needed. The day of the meeting, I arrived early with my grandmother, choosing a table with a clear path to the exit, a precaution Dr. Linden had suggested to help me feel secure. When my parents entered the restaurant, I was struck by how much they had aged. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother's face bore new lines of stress or sadness. They approached tentatively, as if afraid I might bolt at any sudden movement. The initial greetings were awkward, filled with comments about the weather and how well I looked. Then, after we had ordered drinks, my father cleared his throat. "Brandon, thank you for agreeing to see us," he began, his voice rougher than I remembered. "There is nothing we can say to adequately address the harm we caused you, but we want you to know that we recognize it now. We failed you profoundly as parents." My mother, tears already forming, added, "The family therapist helped us see the pattern we had created, how we consistently prioritized Emma's needs and feelings over yours. We have no excuse, only deep regret." I listened silently, searching their faces for the dismissiveness I had come to expect, but finding instead what appeared to be genuine contrition. "What specifically do you regret?" I asked, needing more than general acknowledgement. They exchanged glances before my father continued. "We regret never celebrating your achievements with the enthusiasm they deserved. We regret making you work for basic necessities while giving Emma everything freely. We regret not protecting you from her jealousy and cruelty. Most of all, we regret that it took nearly losing you to begin to see these failures. We understand if you cannot forgive us," my mother added softly. "We just wanted you to know that we recognize the truth of your experience now, and we are deeply sorry for the pain we caused." I had imagined this moment many times over the years, fantasizing about dramatic confrontations or tearful reconciliations. The reality was quieter, but somehow more profound. I felt a weight lifting, not because I was ready to forget the past, but because my reality was finally being acknowledged by the very people who had gaslit me about it for so long. "Thank you for saying that," I finally responded. "I cannot offer instant forgiveness or a return to normal family relations. Too much has happened. But I appreciate your willingness to acknowledge the truth, and I am open to slow, careful steps toward a new kind of relationship, one based on honest communication and respect for boundaries." We agreed to occasional email exchanges as a starting point, with the possibility of infrequent structured visits if those went well. As we parted, my mother asked hesitantly if I would consider meeting with Emma at some point in a therapeutic setting. "She has changed, Brandon," she said. "The therapy has helped her understand her actions and their impact." "Perhaps eventually," I replied, not willing to commit further at that point. 2 months later, after regular email communication with my parents that remained respectful of my boundaries, I agreed to a mediated meeting with Emma at her therapist's office. Walking into that room was one of the hardest things I had ever done, my body tense with memories of our last encounter. Emma looked up as I entered, her expression a complex mixture of shame, hope, and fear. She had cut her hair short and dressed simply nothing like the attention-seeking style she had favored in high school. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I know I have no right to expect you to hear me out." With the therapist's guidance, Emma spoke about her journey since the incident. How the court-ordered therapy had initially been something to endure, but had gradually become a lifeline as she confronted the person she had been and the harm she had caused. "I was taught to see myself as special, and you as competition," she explained. "When you achieved something wonderful, I could only see it as a threat to my position. It was a terrible, distorted way of viewing the world, and it led me to hurt the one person who had never actually done anything to harm me." She spoke about her diagnosis of narcissistic personality traits fostered by our parents' differential treatment and the hard work of developing empathy and accountability. "I do not expect your forgiveness," she concluded, "but I want you to know that I recognize the full horror of what I did, and I am committed to never being that person again." I did not offer easy absolution, but I did acknowledge her efforts toward change. "We may never have a normal sibling relationship," I told her, "but I am willing to cautiously see where this new awareness might lead." The healing process with my family continued slowly over the next year, with carefully maintained boundaries and occasional setbacks. I remained closest to my grandmother, whose unconditional love had been my salvation during the darkest times. Meanwhile, my artistic career flourished. The solo exhibition in Chicago led to critical acclaim and new opportunities. I began teaching part-time at a community arts center, finding unexpected fulfillment in helping others discover their creative voice. The centerpiece of my next exhibition was a large-scale installation titled Family Systems, exploring the complex interplay of love, harm, healing, and forgiveness through abstracted family portraits and shared spaces. When it opened in New York, my grandmother was there beaming with pride. My parents attended at my invitation, their presence a testament to the gradual rebuilding of trust. Emma did not attend, respecting that some boundaries were still necessary. A prominent art critic described the work as a profound meditation on the possibility of healing even after fundamental betrayal, noting that the artist neither romanticizes forgiveness nor dwells in victimhood, instead charting a nuanced path through the aftermath of family trauma. Standing in that gallery, surrounded by work that transformed my pain into beauty and meaning, I realized how far I had come from the frightened, devalued boy who had once believed himself unworthy of love. The fall down those stairs had nearly killed me, but it had also freed me from a cycle of seeking approval that would never come. I had built a life rich with purpose and genuine connection, a life where my worth was not measured against someone else's, where my voice was heard and my presence valued. The journey had been painful beyond words, but I would not trade the hard-won wisdom it had brought me. The fall down those stairs broke my body, but it fixed my life. Sometimes the worst moments become the doorways to our best future. I am living proof that you can rewrite your story even when others try to define your worth. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, or measured yourself against impossible standards, remember this. Your value does not depend on anyone else's ability to see it. You are worthy of love simply because you exist. Have you ever had to break free from toxic family dynamics to find yourself goad? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming adversity, and share with someone who might need to hear that they too can build a life on their own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey.